The Spin-Off Podcast Network. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
The Fold is brought to you by O-Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Nau mai hoki mai ki a The Fold, e mihi nei ko Duncan Greive tōku ingoa. Welcome to the second of a two-part mini monopod summer series. In the first, I talked about the aftermath of the merger. If, as looks increasingly likely, they blow it up, what should they do instead? Check that out in the feed. But today I want to talk about artificial intelligence, which has had a pretty extraordinary year in terms of shifting from the sort of abstract force that is in science fiction or, decides what content we get served on social platforms to something that we can actually play around with ourselves. And, we saw that first in the likes of Dall-E 2, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, these image creation platforms that emerged almost, it felt like, weekly around the middle of the year and really started to show pretty stunning results where people who figured out ways to write sophisticated prompts could get very sophisticated imagery that would ordinarily have taken a visual artist, a designer, a long time to make if they could even make it. And, it caused a lot of consternation in the visual community. You've seen the work in a lot of places. You can kind of sense that it's in the background of a lot of things. But that was the kind of big explosion, and there's a lot in it, which I'll talk about in a bit, about how that impacts the world. And then the second one, which has come out in only the last few weeks, is called ChatGPT, which has come out of OpenAI and is a sort of a text version of the same thing. You write a prompt into a box, and it spits out some startlingly well-written and crafted text. But not only that, you can get it to write a screenplay or some code, and if it, you can look at that code, and if the code doesn't work, you can ask it to find out what's wrong with the code. We're really, this thing's been out, a few weeks, and already people are doing some pretty extraordinary things with it. And again, it's prompting a lot of excitement in some quarters and a lot of anguish in others. And I basically just sort of want to dig into that because I think it's a profoundly challenging technology in multiple ways. To be clear, it doesn't do away with the need for human interaction. A lot of what it spits out, is just wrong. I asked it, for example, to write me a history of recessions in New Zealand over the past 100 years. It was really readable. It was like a good explainer. It just missed 3 recessions completely. So that's, this is the kind of, you just need a layer of fact checking in there, just like you need probably someone who knows how to code to feed it prompts that'll get you good code in the first place. So in some respects, it can actually just make humans more efficient right now, though, we should always caveat, this is really early. Give it time. It'll just get better, and it'll get better very fast. I also think it's, there's a version of this that's a real challenger to Google, which has felt completely hegemonically indomitable in search for a long time, still obviously massively powerful and successful. But, just like we've seen, this research showing that a lot of Gen Z people will search within TikTok, for example, rather than within Google. I think there will be someone who sort of figures out a way to, productize ChatGPT as a search engine because it uses natural language. It removes a layer from it. The problem with that being that it's often wrong. So you have this thing that is very convincing, and just the only problem is that it might not be right. I guess stepping back, to me, the thing that's really confronting about this is like right now we're in a bit of a negotiation with Google as the news industry about, we're just trying to kind of get them to give fair compensation for the use of our work. They have had this thing called feature snippets for a long time. You'll have definitely seen it. It's where you basically ask Google a question and it'll set up a bunch of AI-generated similar questions. You click down on a button and it will take a chunk of text highlighted from another source, often a news organization. That'll be the answer that you're looking for. That's great as a product. And it's great for Google, which can sell ads around that, gets data around that. It's just terrible for the news organization, which doesn't even know the thing happened in the first place. The ChatGPT version of that is even more confronting in that it can basically just read the internet once, digest it, and then start to spit out answers, and it doesn't even know its sources. Like it basically uses sort of pattern matching and natural language to just tell you some things. And so if you're the human who created that knowledge, vetted it, put it online, in much the same way as artists feel like they got totally dicked over by the various AI art generation tools reading their work and then folding, synthesizing that and then spitting it out as an image. And I think they absolutely have a point there, by the way. I also think that those who created the knowledge that the OpenAI has digested have a right to be frustrated at the way that information is being used by all kinds of large language processing tools and just kind of given to people without any kind of compensation or, more fundamentally, and any incentive structure economically to create more verified information or screenplays or whatever the hell you name. And with Google, as much as there's a frustration there, the source. The source is right there with you. With ChatGPT, at least right now, it does not know the source. It cannot tell you the source. That's a really confronting thing in terms of how that interacts with the rest of us. To me, we are literally weeks into this kind of next revolution on the text-based side. I think it's completely inconceivable that we don't have nicely designed sites which are basically full of auto-generated text. In fact, it doesn't seem like particularly inconceivable that you could ask ChatGPT to create a site and then just continually fill it with news stories which will be indexed by Google that are basically kind of sophisticated seeming answers to almost every conceivable question. They know, you wouldn't have to necessarily vet them. They just exist. And if people found them convincing enough, I don't know, it feels like we still are living in the era where there are chum boxes, those like weird ads that you see at the bottom of stories with like someone's gross toe and a very clickable headline. That's still a business right now. So if there's any opportunity to create content for almost zero cost and wrap ads around it and sell it, someone's going to do it. Like that's just kind of like an iron law of the internet. And right now, a lot of them are false. Maybe they get better. I don't know. Like, I really try not to be a Luddite about this. I'm a journalist. I think journalism matters. I think that it's a lot harder and more complicated than people give it credit for. But I also don't think the world owes us a living. There are lots of people who spend their lives operating in a kind of a post-news environment. They get by just fine, and in some ways it reminds me of the way that like active fund managers get annoyed at index funds for, sort of piggybacking on their hard research. That's true, but the average person, you sort of basically end up talking your own book. I like to think that it's important that journalism exists. I like to think that it shouldn't be a philanthropic activity, that AI replacing what we do, let alone what screenwriters and poets and coders do, is a kind of a scary process. But let's be honest, from the 1850s on, we have seen successive waves of manual labor disrupted by machines, and the whole kind of thesis is that, that's unfortunate, but progress marches on. It's only now that it's come for sort of knowledge economy workers that we're getting really upset about it. And so, I'm trying to kind of wrestle with both those things. But fundamentally, I do feel like as a society, you need some sort of fact-checking mechanism. You need to pay attention to your information architecture. You want a way of people testing whether something's true. I saw a TikTok recently. It was super compelling. The person delivering it was very passionate. One of the things they said was that the richest 3 families own more than half of New Zealand combined. And you're like, holy, that's really full on. It's also hard to know exactly what it means, but I just can't conceive of a way it could possibly be true. But it has been viewed over 300,000 times, and that's where our attention is going. So I don't know. The stuff is really confronting. It's happening really fast. It feels like our politicians and policymakers are, to some degree, fighting yesterday's war. I do kind of wish that someone would kind of, the way that you're starting to see in Europe and the US, start paying a lot of attention to this and really kind of grappling with its complexity, something that's part of their platform. Haven't seen it yet, but I live in hope. Because, just to revert back to the original point, for all creators in this sort of modern economy, the incentives are around volume. There are already masses of videos teaching you how to use it to create scripts for your videos. That's obviously become a big theme for TikTok creators. I played around with it. The writing's better than a lot of what you see in commodity news. It's very convincing, but like I say, it's just not accurate. And if you start to have people give all of their attention to platforms which are unvetted, they will, if you've got a compelling person who you've developed a relationship with, who you believe, if they tell you something's true, it will start to become part of your reality. And if you don't have a mechanism to test whether that's accurate, I don't know. It just feels like maybe you're going to have more little mini festivals on the lawn of Parliament if that's the case. So, I don't know exactly what the response to this is, but it just needs to be something you take a lot more seriously than this is like a cute thing I can do some tweets about. We have another pipe disrupting the old pipes and getting further and further from any system which might incentivize the creation of verified facts that we can sort of debate collectively as a species. And while we all have issues with the media, it did at least serve as a staging ground with some basic rules attached where arguments could be litigated with reference to facts that everyone agreed on. And I think when that goes, we lose a lot, from politics, from business, from society. And so I guess this is my, this is a chill and cheery thing to be talking about over summer, but there's just something disquieting about how fast this is advancing and how little attention we seem to be paying to how broadly it might impact. I could just be wrong. It could be that this is just a cute sideshow. People incorporate it into their working lives and we just move on. But it feels like the pace and the accessibility and the way it meshes with a lot of our information architecture, that it might not stay cute for long. That is the second of my mini monopods. I hope it was entertaining. I really appreciate your listening over summer, but also throughout the whole year. I'll be back with normal service resuming on January 16. Ka kite.
The Fold is brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network. It's hosted by Duncan Greive, with production by Tiahe Butler and Samuel Robinson. Series production is by Jane Yee.
That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at O Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to O Media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The spin-off's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.